federal government has asked for strict adherence to the guidelines in the reopening of worship centers, as Lagos government also gives specific days and strict rules in the reopening of churches and mosques in the nation's commercial capital. Tonight, we continue our assessment of the Buhari 5 years in office, and the Minister of Works and Housing, Babatunde Fashola, joins us on the program to speak on the promises of the Buhari government 5 years ago and the re-election campaign promises. How far? Where are the works? We ask Mr. Fashola tonight. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the program. This is Politics Today, live on Channels Television. I'm Sean Kimbaloye at Channels Television's global headquarters here in Lagos. Tonight, we'll give you some quick information about the position of the federal government on reopening of worship centers in the nation. And of course, in the face of COVID-19 pandemic, the Presidential Task Force briefing today continued. The federal government is asking for strict adherence to the guidelines in the reopening of worship centers. Meanwhile, in Lagos, the government here said that has asked churches and mosques to reopen from Friday, June the 19th, while churches can now open on Sunday, June the 21st, but with a crowd capacity not more than 40%. Vigils and other programs are still suspended, though. I'll check some other stories we're following for you on our political roundup.
The House of Representatives is asking the Inspector General of Police to immediately commence investigations into the cases of Uwa Mozowa, Tina Ezekwe, the reported rape of a minor in Jigawa State. The House resolution is in reaction to a motion of urgent public importance on the need to condemn the rising cases of sexual violence and other social vices against women and police brutality. The lawmakers called for stiffer punishment against sexual offenders, but majority of them, however, voted against the castration of men who rape minors. The governor of Kaduna State, Nasir El-Rufai, has met with traditional rulers in the state to discuss and map out modalities ahead of the reopening of economic and business activities in the state. Speaking at the meeting, El-Rufai calls for collaboration and support of all residents and stakeholders in the state as the state government intensifies efforts to contain the spread of the novel coronavirus. An Edo State High Court sitting in Benin City, the state capital, has adjourned till 17th of June for the definite hearing of a substantive suit challenging the membership status of Mr. Osage Izeyamo, who is an aspirant of the Edo State governorship election under the All Progressives Congress APC. A member of the APC, Mr. Kenneth Azekome, on behalf of himself and members of the executive committee of the APC in Edo State, dragged the national leadership of the APC national chairman, Adams Oshomole, and Mr. Osage Izeyamo over the waiver granted to Izeyamo to contest the APC primaries of the Edo State governorship election. The Commissioner for Communication and Orientation in Edo State, Mr. Paul Ohombamo, has resigned his position. The special advisor to Governor Godwin Obaseki on media and communication strategy confirmed this to Channels Television on Thursday. The governor thereafter approved the appointment of Mr. Stewart Efe to replace Mr. Ohombamo.
Thank you so much, everyone. Let's get to our conversation of tonight. We continue our assessment of the promises of the Buhari government since the last 5 years and when the mandate was renewed 1 year ago. So it's been 4 years plus one, first term, and now the first year of the second term. How far has the Buhari government performed? Tonight, we take on the issues of infrastructure, specifically on the issues of works and housing. Our guest tonight is the Minister of Works and Housing. And we do hope that tonight we will stay on the issues of works, and tomorrow it may be able to rejoin us and talk on housing. We'll stay on works tonight. Let's show you some of the promises of the Buhari government, the campaign promises and what they said they were going to do 5 years ago as regarding road construction and works. Take a look at some of those promises. One, creating a national infrastructure development bank to provide loans at nominal interest and rates exclusively for this sector. Also, construction of 3,000 kilometers of superhighway, including service trunks. Also, construction and completion of some of these major roads: the Second Niger Bridge, East-West Road, Abuja, Kaduna, Zaria to Kano Road, amongst others. But how far, if you ask this question, based on these promises, the scorecard has been released by the presidency. Let's now put face to some of these issues. Tonight, welcome the Minister of Works and Housing and former governor of Lagos State, Babatunde Fashola. Thank you, Honorable Minister. It's good to see you on this COVID-19 period. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on the program.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. So let's begin. If you look at the promises, we have a lot of stops on this program, but let's do a preamble. Looking at what was laid as promises, the campaign promises, because you were you played a pivotal role in the campaigns 5 years ago. If you look at the campaign promises and what we have today, would you say that the government that you are serving in has lived up to the promises?
Given the circumstances and the results, we have done a lot much more with less resources. And perhaps the place to start is just yesterday. Just yesterday, the government approved a refund of 148 billion naira to 5 states. Those states are Rivers, Bayelsa, Osun, Cross River, and Ondo states on a bilateral and bipartisan basis. This is to complete the number of refunds promised to state governments by the president when he was seeking re-election for road interventions on federal roads that they had done since year 1999, which were federal government responsibility. The government has redeemed 550 billion of that to 31 states before. So these were the last 5 states. On a bipartisan basis, it is important first to emphasize that, and also to let Nigerians know that these are debts that the previous government handed over at the time when oil was selling at over $100 per barrel. Those roads were neglected then, they were not done then. This government has inherited them at a time where revenues have dropped significantly, sometimes to as low as $20 per barrel. But the commitment remains, and this is part of the national debt that the opposition has made a very big issue of. They were inherited debts that are now being settled. I think that's where to start. The other place to go is that with much less resources, we have committed to a more radical infrastructure development across Nigeria. So as I speak to you now, we're executing 600 road projects across all the states in the Federal Republic of Nigeria. We're in universities repairing internal roads, reconstructing internal roads of federal universities that have been left behind. That is what we inherited, and we're not complaining about it. We're dealing as best with it as our resources permit. So this is where we are. On terms of all those super highways you mentioned, it is no longer news. The Abuja-Kaduna highway is under construction. So is the Bodo-Boni Bridge, which was conceived in 1977, awarded 3 times unsuccessfully. Construction is going on there as I speak to you. So the Second Niger Bridge and the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway that was constructed by sloganeering. Now work is going on there. What is the impact? We haven't finished, but any road user, regular road user, will tell you today that their journey times have been improved compared to when we resumed in 2015 on the major highways. But there is still construction bottleneck. There are still places where work hasn't finished. There are places where compensation is being paid, and therefore we can't walk. But those who have traveled even during this period will tell you by road that it is taking them about 10 to 13 hours to travel from Lagos to Abuja. The story in 2015 was they used to sleep on those roads. Enugu, Port Harcourt, you can go now today to Enugu from Port Harcourt and return. Before, you would have to sleep somewhere on the road to get there. Same thing, Ilori, Jeba. Same thing, Lagos, Ibadan. Nobody is sleeping on those roads anymore. But granted, we haven't finished, and we're dealing with how to get the best resources to deal with these projects and finish them.
All right.
And I think it is important to make this point, because I've also heard some suggestions which are welcome about why we are not constructing during this COVID period. I think it is important someday channels and your competitors perhaps may move to more serious educative issues about what it takes to construct a road. First, you have to design. Before you design, you have to inspect, you have to survey, you have to do impact assessment, you have to compute compensation. So this is one of the reasons why Ado-Ekiti, Akure Road, for example, is just going now to Federal Executive Council for approval. It took a year to design that road, to expand it from 2 to 4 lanes, and before we started the procurement. So these are the challenges. And then moving construction materials. Most of the construction materials in Lagos comes from Ogun. Most of the construction materials in the east and south comes from Cross River. So all of that logistic is a challenge for any nation in the world.
Honorable Minister, perhaps we will touch on specifics in a moment, but quickly clarify to us, since you barred some state governments now from repairs of federal roads, because henceforth the federal government has now said, if you want to work on these roads, you must get the approval of the Federal Ministry of Works. So the big question is that the best approach in handling some of this situation where some of these roads are in very terrible situation?
Okay, let me say that, first of all, Nigerians perhaps will be better informed if they know that the Federal Republic of Nigeria as a whole has over 200,000 kilometers of road network. Out of that 200,000 kilometers, about 18%, representing about 30-something thousand kilometers, belongs to federal government. About 16% belongs to the state government, and the remaining 60-something percent actually belongs to the local government. What the states have done, and I have been a governor before, I intervened on the Lagos-Badagry Expressway, I intervened on the Korodu Road before it was later handed over, and so on and so forth, is that those roads that have become municipal roads, integral to their cities, to the development of their cities and the livelihood of their citizens, they had to spend their money on it. They did so, mind you, Sheung, at a time Nigeria paid $12 billion of cash to creditors. That's a major policy decision that has caused some not easy debate. How do you go and pay a creditor when the roof to your house is leaking? Perhaps if we had done something differently, invested that $12 billion instead of paying Paris Club debt, we may be in a better position today. But no sooner after we paid that debt, we went back to start borrowing. And we did not pay the debts owed to the local people, the state government. So what the president has done this time is to say, I will pay the inherited debts that I met. I promised to do so, and he has kept his promise. But please, leave my roads alone. Go and face your own roads. Don't impose priorities on me. I have my own priorities. And therefore, from January 2016, all the state governors were notified, don't touch federal roads again if you want refund. If you want refund. If you do not want refund and you want to do it, take permission, take approval, and work with the Ministry of Works to deal with it. Because the states too haven't completed all their roads. Neither have the local governments completed their roads. We are now focusing on over 600 roads that would impact life in a very positive way. Some of the impact I've already told you is a reduction in travel time. Some of the impact also is the stimulation of the rural economies where we get building materials, laterite, sand, rocks, and people are benefiting from that. And also the job creation. As at the time I took office as minister, I did a survey of the 5 big construction companies in Nigeria. Only 5 of them had laid off over 20,000 workers. All of those workers, we have returned back to work. But we are now constrained for resources, and we are looking at so many options: road tax credit, infrastructure scheme, which is being used to build the Obajan-Akaba, the Apapa-Urushoki Expressway. We are looking at the Sukuk, which is being applied to about 26 major roads in the country. We're expanding that number soon. I hear the Sukuk has closed, and I hear also that it has been oversubscribed. So there might be an opportunity to get more resources into roads and so many other options.
Let's take a breather. But when we come back, we will touch on specifics. The Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, the second Niger Bridge, and some of the other major projects in Nigeria. How far has the Buhari government delivered? Send some of your questions in. The Minister of Works, Babatunde Fashola, is our guest tonight on the program. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Let's get back to the conversation, everyone. Welcome back to the discussion on the assessment of Buhari government 5 years in office, the promises and the performance. The guest tonight on the program is the Minister of Works and Housing, Mr. Babatunde Fashola. Thank you so much, Honorable Minister for Works, for joining us tonight on the program. Let's get to some specifics. A lot of issues that are on the minds of many Nigerians, and perhaps one of the biggest projects on the hands of this government is the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. The Ministry of Works is saying that the 2021 delivery date, that's next year, may not be visible as planned. So when do you plan to finish up the work?
The Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, the second Niger Bridge, the Abuja-Kaduna-Kano Highway are part of the project funded under the Presidential Infrastructure Development Fund. And the expected delivery dates are Q1 of 2022. Now, let me also say that it is important to always keep in context the opportunities that have been missed on all those projects. Since 2007, no measure of reasonable construction took place there on Lagos-Ibadan, except palliative. It was when this government came that construction really started. And in order to dimension what is going there, we are constructing 114 kilometers of highway, expanding from 2 to 3 lanes. So you do the math, 114 times 3 on one side and 114 times 3 on the other side. And on every inch of that road, we are digging up to a meter or more, removing the old soil, replacing it. So that is going on inch by inch, meter by meter. And work is undoubtedly and undebatably going on there. Those who don't use the road will not appreciate what is going on there. But those who use the road on a daily basis for their survival will tell you, except for bottlenecks that happen when accidents happen and articulated trucks, trailers cause bottlenecks there, their travel time has significantly reduced.
So, I mean, in specifics, Honorable Minister, the plan was to, you were telling us about under the presidential funding, but the initial plan was to deliver the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway next year, isn't it?
Shehu, that was the plan, and you know that we lost almost a year of work. I was in your studio to complain at the time when the budget for that road was reduced from 31 billion to 10 billion. At the time, we were owing the contractor 15 billion, and essentially no work was done in that year of 2017 because the contractor just stopped work. And you, particularly as the local studio on that road, carried the stories of frustrations and delays experienced by commuters at the time. That story has changed now. So if we didn't have money, clearly we couldn't have done what we needed to do. That was the National Assembly at the time. And today that we now have a cooperative and responsive parliament, some people don't like it. They say now that they are just bowing to the executive. But at the time when they took an extreme position, it wasn't the executive that suffered, as President Buhari used to say. It is the ordinary people of Nigeria who felt the pain of that lack of cooperation.
So we are before March or April next year or 2022, Lagos-Ibadan Expressway will be ready. Is that what you're saying, Minister?
Q1 of 2022 is the expected delivery date. Mind you, as I speak to you now, we have lost essentially the prime of our working period, which is the dry season in the COVID period. We have to regain and recover all of that. We have also lost some of our expected revenue plans. At the time COVID hit Nigeria, we were doing 2.59% growth rate. Now we are heading for a recession globally, and Nigeria will not be insulated from that. But we are working on plans to bring the economy back on track.
So for the second Niger bridge, how far, what is the percentage of work done? And you have said that is one of the projects that will be delivered in Q1 of 2022. What was the percentage of work done on the second Niger bridge?
I just received the monthly report for the second Niger bridge today. I haven't read it because I've been in meetings all day. But when I visited in February of this year, and I think your crew were also there with me, all the pile and foundation works have been completed, visible. What is now left is the deck on the pile where the vehicles will drive. And the plan then was, I think, to do 2-point-something meters of deck launch per month. And the plan was that one side would have been completely decked by the end of September this year, and then work will start on the other side. Work is also going on the link road from Onitsha side and also on the Asaba side. And your crew and I toured those places, and you have all of the videos and the reports and the cameras in your studio. So, plus or minus the time that we have lost, and during the lockdown, nobody could work. All the states closed their borders. So materials couldn't move, men couldn't move, but we have asked them, they are part of the contracts that were remobilized back to site in the first week of the easing of the lockdown. That is 11 major contractors executing 53 projects in 26 states of the country. So we have to work with the government forum to allow men, to allow materials and all of that. And we now have to develop new safety guidelines for construction sites so that while people are working, they are also safe. They have to change how they approach and use protective equipment, how they are fed on site, how they manage their eating materials, how they clean steering wheels of equipment, because when you work for a time, you have to stop and let somebody take over. So those protocols are also being developed as we go on.
All right. So within the next few minutes that we have before the close of the program, the recently repatriated 311 million US dollars Sani Abacha loot is to be used in funding 3 of the federal government's priority projects: the second Niger Bridge, the Abuja, Kaduna, Kano, and the Lagos-Ibadan highways. Have you gotten hold of that funding for this project?
My ministry does not deal with the funding under that project. First, I've told you about the Presidential Infrastructure Development Fund, the PIDF. It is managed by the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority. So this $300 million will go into that fund, but they are stratified for these 3 projects. The governance process
are they ready?
Is that...
But the funding, is it ready now? Can you confirm to us if the funding...
I can't answer that because the money didn't come to my ministry. It was released to the Nigerian government through the central bank and I believe onto the NSIA. Now, what happens simply is that the contractor does his work. Our staff, from the controller to the directors and the ministry, provide the technical governance to make sure that the work is properly done, certified, and then we send the certificate that we validate to the NSIA. NSIA also have their own technical consultants who cross-check, and if they are satisfied, they pay. That is how we have done it in the last 18 months, and these funds, when they come in, if they come in, will not change that governance process. And right. there are plans, I think, by the Attorney General to also expand the governance process and oversight for it. What we are concerned about is making money work for Nigerians. The evidence of what we have done with the Sukuk is there for all those who use all the roads being built by the Sukuk, and so on and so forth.
All right, Honorable Minister, we just have a few seconds to the close of the program. Unfortunately, there are so many questions on the table to private partnership on some of these projects and a host of others. But maybe you can handle this for us in 30 seconds, Honorable Minister. The Federal Secretariat in Ikoyi, can you tell us anything about that? It is posed a security threat in the way it has been abandoned. And that's not the only federal assets that have been abandoned in Nigeria. What can you tell us about the Federal Secretariat in Ikoyi? Just about 30 seconds before we close.
Well, the Federal Secretariat was sold by the federal government through the Presidential Implementation Committee. So my ministry does not have any direct oversight about it. But as I told you before, we can't discuss 600 road and highway projects even in 60 minutes, talk less of 30 minutes. So this really does, I hope, has been a little helpful to Nigerians, but I think we need to engage this matter more seriously as a developmental challenge that Nigerians need to know what is going on their roads. And we need to put more reporters on the road. We can't discuss Nigerian roads in a TV station. It just doesn't work.
Honorable Minister, if you can give us the confirmation, because this is in two parts, it's a two-series interview for Works Today, Housing Tomorrow. Nigerians are expecting that tomorrow you might be able to join us and discuss housing. Are we good on that, Honorable Minister?
I confirm. I gave my word before.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister. So stand by with us, everyone. For tomorrow, 7 p.m. same time, Honorable Minister of Works and Housing will be discussing more on how far the Buhari government have gone in 5 years in works and housing. But that's how far we can go tonight, everyone. Many thanks for watching. I'm Sean Kimbalwe. Bye for now.